Hey kids, it's Mr. Fly here, hope you're well. Now, I've been away for the last month or so, and that means I haven't ridden any of the bikes here in my garage for, well, it's been about 5 weeks actually. Well, bar one. I did ride the Speed Twin last night because I couldn't wait to get back on the bike. But what I want to do today is give them each a bit of a run, make sure there's no issues, having had them sat here for over a month. And it turns out it might be a little bit of a disaster movie. I already spotted a bit of a problem. But first off, let me get some bikes out of the way, and then I'll show you what the problem is and see what you think. I'm whacked now, I've got my bikes out of the garage. Anyway, now I've made some space, let me show you what this potential disaster movie is. The bike that I haven't got out is my Royal Enfield Interceptor. Here she is, beautiful, but something I couldn't help but notice as I moved the bikes out, or when I walked in here the other day, is, look down here on the floor, this big greasy stain, and it seems to be coming from the Enfield. In fact, if you take a close look, you can see it's actually over the tyre there, and I moved the bike back a little bit, that's why it's moved around, and you can see it's sort of dripping from this area somewhere. So I reckon it's coming from the shock absorber as opposed to anything else. So for example, it's not dirt brake fluid, because as you can see here, look, the little brake fluid reservoir is still full with fluid. But if you look here, you can see, you might be able to see in the light, I don't know, that there seems to be some oil around here. So I think that oil has probably let go from this reservoir here, and it's somehow dripping down here. I don't know how it's happened, because I haven't ridden this bike for a while. So it's a bit tricky. So, but this stuff here, you know, there's an awful lot of it here, and it looks pretty thick and gooey. So I reckon that is probably out of the shock absorber. First off, I thought it was out the Panigale, because that was the bike that I rode last when I made that video that I think I titled something like The Truth About Riding Sports Bikes. If you haven't seen that one, go and take a look. It did quite well. I thought I'd park that up and something to let go while I'd been away, but in fact, it does seem to be coming from the Enfield, but it doesn't look like it's coming from the engine. So what I'm thinking I'm going to do, I want to give all the bikes a little quick ride just to make sure they're all fine. Obviously, there's an issue with the Enfield, but I think if it is the suspension, it's just going to handle flipping strange. So I'll just give it a little go and see how it feels and see if any more oil comes out. And obviously I'll just check that there's no actual leakage when I start her up from around the engine. But so it's a little bit tricky. Don't really know whether I should do that or not. But so it could be disastrous. But I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's disastrous anyway, because I'm going to have to get something done with the Enfield. But anyway, I'll be interested in your advice as to what you think I should do. Is it a matter of just buying a new shock and getting it bolted on there? Can I get that one fixed? What do you think? I'm rubbish with technical items, so looking for your advice. I think that particular shock is a relatively inexpensive one from Tech Bike Parts, probably made in China or something. The suspension on the back of this isn't that good, to be fair. I mean, I've got the original shocks from before I did the work on it, so I could put those back on, but they won't look quite as good because they're not blacked out. I could just bite the bullet, buy another set of shocks from Tech Bike Parts, but that's going to be relatively expensive. I think I need to look up and see how much they are. Anyway, what do you think the best course of action is? I'm going to just give it a little bit of a go, just to make sure the engine runs okay. Let's hope I don't cause any more harm than good. Fingers crossed. Before I jump on the Enfield though, I will just mop up this greasy mess on the floor here. Absolutely grim. Right, so I've wiped the oil up as best I can off the floor there and just move the bike over here. Now I've cleaned up as much of the oil as I can off here, make sure there's no oil on the tyre, of course, nothing around the brakes, and just giving this a bit of a wipe as well. I've had a look underneath. I can't see that there's any obvious leaks under there coming from like the sump or anything like that, so I'm still thinking it probably is the shock, but just in case it is more serious and it's something to do with the engine, I thought I'd just have a quick look at and check the oil in the engine, make sure there is a bit of oil. I know you're supposed to do it when they're warm, but I don't want to start it without knowing for sure there's some oil in there, so I'm going to have a quick peek in there and just check that first. Looking in there, it all looks a bit dry, it has to be said, which is a little bit worrying. Let's just stand the bike upright, see if I can see anything slopping around in there. Need a bit of light in there, I think. Right, what did we do before iPhone torches, eh? Let's again stand her upright, see if I can see anything in there. Not a lot. Let's have a look at the sight glass. Again, it's difficult doing this when the bike is cold, of course, because you know, you are supposed to check the engine oil when the bike is warm, and of course it's not warm. I don't want to warm it up in case there's no oil in it. So let's have a look at the sight glass when I tip the bike up. I'll have to use the camera to do that because I can't look at it while the bike's upright. So I'll use you for this. Right, hopefully you can see the sight glass. Let's get the bike upright. Does any oil appear? Right, there we go, that's it upright. I'm going to look back at this bit of video and see if I can see any oil on that sight glass. If there is, then we're good and I can start her up. If there's not, then I've got a bigger problem than I thought. Right, well, my little camera trick there worked an absolute treat. Hopefully you saw clearly on the sight glass that there's actually plenty of oil actually in the engine. It's probably just drained down where it's been sat here for 5 weeks. That's why I couldn't see anything in the top of the engine. So I'm quite happy to start her up. We'll do that and we'll take her for a ride, see if the suspension feels a bit funny and see if there's any more leaks when we get back. I think that's the probably the best course of action. I won't do anything rash. I'll just do a little gentle ride and see how she feels. Then we'll ride the rest of the bikes, make sure they all run all right as well. Let's go for it. Alrighty, so I jumped on the bike and started her up and everything looked fine. Not loads of smoke coming out the exhaust or anything like that. Sounds fine, and the engine was running fine. So I thought, right, I'll come and have a little ride then and just see if I can feel anything different about the suspension. And pretty much immediately I can feel that the back end is a bit more crashy than normal now. It has to be said on these Enfields, even with that supposedly upgraded shock from Tech Bike Parts, the suspension is a bit crashy at the best of times. But it feels a little bit just on this road, which isn't that bad as roads around here go actually. It's a relatively smooth road, but I can feel some fairly hard bumps at the back end, as if the shock is bottoming out every now and then. It's not terrible by any means, because of course the other shock is still working fine. So I've got half me damping there, half me suspension, but I do think that's what that is. So the fact that there was oil in the engine, the oil leak itself was around, it appeared like it come from that back shock. I think I'm satisfied with my analysis that it is that back shock that has leaked all over the floor. So let me know if you agree or disagree with my analysis, because I'm no expert on this stuff, and I know plenty of you are. So I'll be interested to see your thoughts on that. But as far as this bike's concerned, it seems to be riding absolutely fine from an engine point of view, and everything on it works in terms of electronics and stuff. But yeah, it does feel a bit crashy at the back end, so I've got some work to do, some head scratching to do about how I'm going to get that fixed, whether I can get that shock fixed or whether it's just a replacement part. I'll be interested to hear your views on that one. Alright, I'm going to take this bike back home then, jump on the next one, which I think is probably going to be Mrs. Flyer's little Suzuki 125. Now that little bike is super reliable, nothing ever goes wrong with that. I hope I don't talk anything up, but that's the next one to jump on and see how that goes. Alright, so I'm on Mrs. Flyer's Suzuki now, and before we talk about this, just a word about the Enfield as I rode her some more and took her back home. I have to say, it didn't feel too bad at all. I'm convinced it is that shock that's the problem, that spewed out that oil, but it really wasn't that bad. So I'm not entirely sure whether even bother doing anything about it for the time being, or just see whether it leaks some more and then do something. So yeah, would appreciate your advice on that if you know about these things. Anyway, on to Mrs. Flyer's little Suzuki GSXS215, which is the bike that she's been learning to ride on. Lots of people have asked how she's getting on, and to be honest, she hasn't ridden much through winter. It's been horrible weather up until now. This is the first dry day for what seems like, well, certainly since I've been back in the country. I was out of the country all of March, and I'm recording this on Sunday, April the 2nd, and it's a lovely day, or certainly this afternoon it is, hence why I'm out on the bikes. But if the weather's going to be like this week, then I can imagine me and Mrs. Flyer will be going out for a little ride to a local coffee shop for a coffee and cake, which is what we do. Anyway, at some point I will be, or we will be making a video sort of updating you with her progress. But as far as the bike itself is concerned, these things are absolutely bulletproof. It started on the button. It's a great little bike. There's nothing wrong with this at all. It's sat there. Actually, this has probably sat in the garage for probably 3 months without being started, and it's absolutely fine. I do have it on a constant you know, trickle charger to keep the battery topped up. It probably wouldn't have started if I hadn't done that, but as far as everything else is concerned, the electrics and everything else are great. No smoking when I started out, absolutely brilliant. So thumbs up on the Suzuki. Let's move on to the next bike. Okay, time for a little bit of torture now, because the next bike to try out is my beautiful Ducati 899 Panigale, which I absolutely love. It's a garage queen bike, I openly admit it, but I do like to keep her in legal, roadworthy and running order. Now actually this is the last bike I rode out of my collection about 6 or 7 weeks ago, So she started up fine in the way that Ducatis do. You know, there's always a little bit of doubt when you hit the starter button on a Ducati, isn't there? But no, she's fine and going absolutely fine. Completely different experience to riding the Suzuki, of course. But all I'm doing here, if you're wondering, on these little rides, just to make sure that the bikes are okay, is just checking that everything, like the quick shifter works, the gearbox throughout. The gearbox is all good. Get some oil throughout that. Making sure that all the electrics work. I've tried the horn, the indicators, the brakes as well, front and back, to make sure there's nothing sticking there or seizing up. Really just making sure it's in, you know, proper full working order, and then making sure I'm running the bike for at least 15-20 minutes, getting it up to proper operating temperature, because what you don't want to do is just run the bike and then risk leaving condensation in the machine because it wasn't hot enough. So yeah, I'll run all the bikes for a good run, get them up to operating temperature. I can already tell this is actually because the old Panigale does run pretty warm, and it's actually beautiful day today. Actually, the air temperature is 11 degrees, so it's not super duper warm yet, but spring is just around the corner. There are a few daffodils out and things like that, although I can't see any at this point. But it's absolutely lovely to be out on dry roads in some decent warmth. But of course, the Panigale has its own built-in heater, so and I can feel that already, so that's good. So I'm happy to say the Panigale seems to be absolutely fine after its little month or so layup. All right, time to move on to something a little bit bigger. Actually, just before we jump onto something a little bit bigger, the old Panigale isn't quite right, because she's still idling a little bit rough. Just have a listen every now and then. It's not going to do it now. Hear that? It's not so bad now, it's settling down, but in first gear and idle, it doesn't run quite as smoothly as she should do. Now, I mentioned that before when I rode the bike, and lots of people said maybe it's the fuel, maybe it's just gone off if it's been sat around for a while, so maybe it is that, but I don't know, because it hasn't been sat around that long. We'll see. Anyway, one for me to keep an eye on when she next goes in for a service. I'll get the guys at the Ducati dealer to have a look at that. As soon as I turned the camera off, it started doing it. I turned the camera on again, and now it's, can you hear it? A little bit rough. Hear that? Just a bit of pulsing. All right, enough. Next bike. Right, so after all that bluff and bluster from the Ducati, dramatic and fun as ever, but you know, it is what it is, I jump onto something a little bit more civilised, the gentleman's bike that is the trusty BMW R1200 GS. If I could only have one bike, this would be it. It's just such a great motorcycle. Now, it has been sat in the garage for well over a month, and it did smoke when I started it, but these boxer twins always do, because they sit on the side stand, and of course oil pools in one of the cylinders, so whenever you start these, if they've been on the side stand in particular, they always smoke, so that's perfectly normal. It soon goes after a few seconds of running, but other than that, nothing to report. Absolutely beautiful, comfortable as you like, trusty old workhorse, love it. To the left here, just passing Matilda's here, little cafe in Great Missenden, my favourite. I mention it because it is excellent. I went in there yesterday with Dave from Wheelie Good TV, one of my favourite YouTube channels. If you've not watched that, do go and check him out. Wheelie Good TV. Dave is a professional TV cameraman, so his production standards are absolutely top notch, and not only that, he rides bikes very similar to mine, so if you like my channel, the chances are you'll like his as well. And he's based out of Southern Ireland normally, so the fact that he came and saw me and we went into that cafe yesterday was an absolute winner. So great to see you, Dave, and look forward to riding with you in Ireland sometime. Alright, one more bike to go. Okay, so if the GS was something a little bit more civilised and a little larger, here's something totally civilised and a lot larger again. My brilliant Honda Goldwing. What an absolute beast of a bike this is. When you jump on your bikes next to each other like I've done today, you really do get to appreciate the different qualities of them. And my goodness me, this thing is so comfortable, so performant, it's absolutely lovely. needless to say, I'm glad to say, everything seems to be working absolutely fine on this. Since I rode this last, the clocks have changed. In fact, we've gone into British summertime now. Clocks have sprung forward, and I hadn't noticed it before since I've had this, because I've not even had this bike a year yet. The clock has automatically changed on this. Look, it's gone to 5:38, which is the correct time now, which is excellent. On the Beamer, I meant to say, I noticed that on the nav 5 it was showing the correct time. On the actual instrument binnacle on the BMW, it was an hour behind, even though the bike is set up so that it should set the time on the instrument binnacle from the satellite received from the nav 5, which doesn't seem to work on the Beamer anymore for some reason, so I had to manually update that clock. But no such issue on the Goldwing. It knows about daylight saving, and it's updated the clock for me, so that's good news. So anyway, there we go. That's basically it. Just a little bonus of video. Interested in your views on what's going on with the Royal Enfield. If you think I did the right thing by actually riding it like that, even though I had that oil spewed out the bottom of the bike, it seemed to ride absolutely fine, which is bizarre, but there we go. I will get it looked into next time I'm near somebody who knows what they're talking about. It's been absolutely beautiful to ride my bikes again on a day like today with dry roads and beautiful weather. Look at it, it's absolutely cracking day, and if it wasn't 5:40 and time for me to get home and make Mrs. Flyer her Sunday supper, then I'll be out riding this for a few hours more, because it's an absolute pleasure to be on a bike today on a day like this, especially after such a long layoff. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that little bonus video, and look forward to speaking to you again soon. Until then, this has been the Mr. Flyer. Cheerio.